Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Soraya, and hold on, let me pray before this video. So today's video is all about the second round interview. Everybody has been waiting and anticipating for it. The second part of this video is gonna be about this one particular person who believes I'm a fake scholar. So I'm gonna be taking all of the time in the world to prove to you that I really did get the Posse scholarship. First thing I'm gonna encourage you to do is get some popcorn, get you something to drink, because I feel like this is gonna be a long video. Let me go get my Coca-Cola because you know sis is thirsty. So good morning. I hated the way that video came out yesterday. So the Posse second round interview is very different from the first round interview, and I guess you could say the biggest difference is that it's just a one-on-one kind of thing. Posse group interview was you with a bunch of other students, kind of just building and networking together, and I would say that's like the first interview. The second interview is a one-on-one face-to-face interview with a Posse representative, sometimes two, sometimes three, it just really depends. For me, I was in an interview with two representatives. Yeah, one of them was my mentor. Shout out to you. And by the way, he doesn't even remember interviewing me. That's like kind of bad. That's like the major difference between the first and the second round, is that the first, there's like about 100 kids with you competing, and then the second one is just a one-on-one interview. The second thing I want to say that the interview is all about is it being a conversation, and I want to emphasize the word conversation. Be mindful of like how you want to present the information and how you want to present to what you will talk about in the conversation, but treat what you're saying like it's a conversation with a friend. They want to see how comfortable you are getting with sharing things about you versus it being more like a job interview. Structurally, I'll say that the second round interview is kind of like a job interview, because you know you're being interviewed one-on-one and they ask you certain questions to get a sense of who you are. But I'd say a job interview is literally looking to see if you're qualified for the position. They just want to see what kind of skills you have to bring to their company's table in order to be qualified. Posse is not about qualification or being qualified for the position, because anybody is technically qualified to be a Posse scholar as long as you've taken the SAT or ACT and as long as you've been a high schooler for 4 years. But there's no specific GPA, there's no specific SAT or ACT score that's going to disqualify you from being a Posse scholar. So get that out of your head, get that out of your ass. That's what my teacher told me the other day. I was like, oh my god, you're crazy. The difference between a job interview or any kind of internship or other scholarship interview from a Posse interview. Posse does things very different than any other organization. Most scholarship interviews have a GPA requirement, have an SAT or ACT score requirement. And most job interviews have certain things that you need to be able to bring in order to work in those places. A lot of jobs, you have to have a certain undergraduate degree. You have to have completed some kind of certificate program. A lot of things make you qualified for something, whereas Posse is not looking for qualification. They're not looking to see how well you're able to do something. They're looking to see who you are, how comfortable are you willing to get, if that makes sense. And that's from my experience. I mean, a lot of other people who have been through the interview process may say, well, I felt like mine was more of a qualification kind of aspect, but in my opinion, I feel like Posse is looking for the underdogs in a way, like the ones who may not have the best GPAs and who may not have the best ACT scores, but they can see that you would do great things in the future beyond what you look like on paper. And that's not to say like getting a bad GPA is a good thing or getting a low ACT score is a great thing. It's just to say like they're still willing to give you a chance to be a part of something, to still go to school without, you know, being considered one of the most smartest kids. Like, they're not looking to see how smart you are. I hope I'm starting off very well. I was struggling explaining when I tried to film this yesterday, which is why I didn't use the footage. Alright, so next I want to get into kind of like my personal experience of like how I came up to this revelation of what it means. So I felt like my interview went horrible, and the reason why is because my representatives asked me certain questions that I felt like I knew some of the answers to, but then they kept getting deeper and deeper within that very same question, and I couldn't answer it, or I knew the answer but I didn't want to share that answer with them. And so I'm just gonna kind of go through it and like kind of explain along the way of how that happened. So basically my interview started off pretty typical, like any other job interview, like, hey, we're like your interviewers for today, we've went over your resume, and now we're just gonna ask you some questions just to get a sense of who you are, XYZ, blase, blase, blase. So he basically said, tell me about yourself. That was like his first question. And he was like, we've read through your resume, but we want to know who you are. And my first response was, I don't know, which I feel like is bad. I feel like you should never say I don't know in an interview, because it just, I don't know. I feel like it gives like a vibe of lack of preparation. And two, I don't know, I feel like you just should never say I don't know in an interview. But that's just me. I wasn't sure if he was looking for more like business related, like he wanted to know more about like what I've done with my internships, or if he wanted to know about like my personal life, like my family and like things I've done with them, my life experiences, or if he wanted to know like, hey, like I was part of this internship, what did I do there? I wasn't sure what it was, so I kind of just was like, well, I was born in Colorado, and then I moved to Maryland like before 5th grade, and I've done all these, when I moved, starting at 5th grade, I've done like all of these science programs. I did Science Bowl.
It's time again for the Science Bowl.
Welcome to the Science Bowl. Today, let's meet them now. And Soraya Wyatt.
That's how it interests me.
That's how a lot of things start. And what
I did Science Bowl and all these other things up until about high school, and then I started engaging in more like internships such as USDA and doing all of these science classes in college, just gaining my science understanding, and that's where I am today. Explain to him like a little bit about like where I come from, and then I explained like how I got involved in science, and then I explained where I plan on going. I also said like, so eventually when I go to college, my goal is to major in biology, do pre-med, and then end up going to med school and becoming a doctor. That's my aspirations. And he just was like, okay, so when you moved, what made you like get into science? And I was just like, I don't know, like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean you don't know? And this is where I like knew the answers to the questions, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing the answers. So when I got into Science Bowl, like 5th grade, to be honest with you, it was such a very big culture shock for me. So if you don't know, I'm African American, but I have a more fairer complexion. So when I moved from Colorado, being surrounded by predominantly white people, and then moving to Maryland, being surrounded by predominantly black people, it was a very big culture shock because I've always been around white people. I wasn't understanding what race was. We never saw color, and then being thrown into this environment where everyone sees color, and everyone saw me as this white girl, which I was not. It was a very hard adjustment for me, and I had a lot of trouble making friends. I was getting bullied, 5th grade, like all these other things. And so the reason why I took part in Science Bowl was because my teacher knew I needed an outlet so that I didn't feel uncomfortable. And so basically I joined Science Bowl because I was very uncomfortable 5th grade. Like I had like 0 friends, I was getting bullied, I was getting picked on for being the light-skinned girl in class, and I didn't understand anything related to race. I grew up very sheltered, and I just didn't understand a lot of the things that were happening to me. And so ever since then, feeling so awkward about the people I was surrounded by, I always took part in like different activities so I didn't have to focus on those hard and difficult things I was dealing with. And so Science Bowl for me was like my catapult into engaging in like science related stuff. When joining Science Bowl, I became very interested in more about science, and then as I got older, I kept participating in like different activities and stuff related to science because I got really good at it. But ultimately, the reason why I joined Science Bowl and why I did all of like my science activities wasn't necessarily because I was interested in science. It was because I needed to find my place in school, so I didn't feel left out, I didn't feel alone, I didn't feel bullied and picked on, and so science was kind of like my outlet and my escape from how I felt. It was interesting, and it became like very big for me, but then when I got to high school is when it was kind of like, I'm not really into this anymore, but this is all I know kind of thing. So the reason why I shared the background with you is because he kept asking, my interviewer, the representative kept asking me like why I was so interested in science, why I was passionate about science, and why I wanted to pursue science in the future. And I had a hard time answering that question because truthfully, I didn't feel like I was passionate about science. I've always been very creative and artistic, and I've always been very good with art. I've never channeled it before because I was so invested in like my scientific activities. And when I went to high school, I was like the president of the Greenhouse Club, I was president of the National English Honor Society, and like president of like this Next Generation Youth, which is like another environmental / chemistry club. I was involved in all of these activities. I had like, I guess you could say, the title of being the leader in the group, but I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And so to be honest with him, I eventually just got very frustrated with this interview because I felt like I was BSing the whole thing. I felt like I was lying. I was like, yeah, I'm really passionate about this, but truthfully, I wasn't passionate about any like activity he talked about. And so eventually I kind of just broke, and I was like, you know, to be honest with you, I don't really like what I did in high school. He was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, yes, I was a part of all of these organizations. Yes, I was like the leader in all of these organizations. But for me, it wasn't about the organizations. It was about the friendships I created in these organizations and in the classroom that pushed me to succeed. I think the reason why I value success so much is because of the people that I came across and the people who supported me. I was like in a very awkward place where I felt like I didn't fit in with anybody. I was an outcast. I used to get bullied, and then I didn't really have any friends that I could connect with. And so when I finally met the people I did in middle school and high school and elementary school, joining these particular organizations, I didn't enjoy the organizations or what I was doing in them. I just enjoyed the company and the companionship I built with the people I was involved with, and I feel like they really pushed me to succeed and to do better. And we always talked about how like us getting our work done and us, you know, striving was gonna get us out of like the situations we were in and we were faced with. And so I was very frustrated that I like got to that vulnerable state, like sharing like something that I felt really insecure about, which is, you know, I guess you could say being the loner in high school and middle school, being the one who was bullied. But I feel like in a way, I guess he valued my transparency. But I felt like the interview went bad because I felt like I didn't demonstrate leadership, or I didn't tell him how I was leader. I told him, I don't know, random stuff he probably didn't care about. I felt like he wanted to know, like, yeah, I'm the president of this club, and I love this club because of X, Y, and Z, and I've been part of this club for 4 years, and I made these kinds of changes within this club. That's what I felt like he wanted to hear. But instead I was like, to be honest with you, I don't like any of the activities I was in, and that's bad. For me, I feel like the best experiences I've been given throughout my life were the ones where I connected with people who were going through similar things and uncomfortable situations like I was. to this day, I now interpret that interview so differently. I feel like in my mind, a person who's in a position of leadership is someone who carries a title, who has a certain level of status, and that's what I thought a leadership meant. So I felt like, yes, on paper, I can consider myself a leader. Yes, those can be positions of leadership because you are a person of influence and whatnot. But I felt like I couldn't be a leader if I wasn't passionate about what I did and I wasn't really involved the way I should have been in those leadership positions. So how was I considered a leader? Today I interpret that interview differently because the conversation we had exemplified a form of leadership that may not be recognized, but it is still a form of leadership. The version of leadership was bringing together a group of people who all felt awkward about being in high school, who all felt like they were outcasts and outsiders and felt very lonely and isolated, but creating a group of people who feel this way and being a support network and encouraging each other to succeed is a leadership role, because you are bringing people together and you're encouraging them to grow as people. And I feel like that's what I did and what I valued more from high school, was creating this bond and the support group that I needed to make it through high school. That's where I felt like my leadership came from, and eventually my leadership prevailed and got its recognition when I was getting my 4.0s and when I was the top 10% of my class. All of it paid off in the end is what I would describe as my leadership. So my advice to you is, if you feel like you're not really the best leader, you feel like you've never been part of anything where you had like this presidency, you had this certain level of status, there are ways of you being a leader without having those things. A leader is someone who is willing to put in the work when no one else is. A leader is somebody who's wanting to support someone who feels left behind. And a leader is someone who is there when another person needs it. A leader doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is at the top of this organization and looking over everyone. A leader is usually someone who is encouraging and providing a certain level of influence so that other people can grow in the process. And that's how I see it today, and that's how I see my interview today versus how I saw it before. My first I thought the interview was horrible because I didn't know how to answer his questions the way I thought I should have, which is why I felt like I did bad. But today, looking back, I feel like my transparency and honesty and realness and truth about what I was going through in high school is what really made me stand out, because I feel like being vulnerable is something that a lot of people don't want to do. We look at it as a weakness versus as a strength. And I felt weak in that situation for sharing with him like my most insecure aspect of what I experienced in high school. But to be honest, I feel like that's what we need more of, is the transparency and honesty. So if I would change the interview, I would say I wish I just had a lot more confidence in how I expressed who I was, and a lot more confidence in like just sharing my story. But overall, I feel like I got across what I wanted to share with him, which is why I shared it. So I would not change my interview at all. And don't get me wrong, if you are like the president of the volleyball team and you feel like that makes you a leader, that is leadership, being the president, because you are leading a group of people. But if you're not doing anything in that position to uplift someone, then that doesn't necessarily make you a leader. So really, leadership is all up to you. I feel like the second round is all of what you make it. How you present yourself as a leader, how personal are you willing to get with your representative, and how well are you able to carry the conversation without it being a structurally job question answer. Are you able to start off with a leading question and then just kind of evolve the conversation into this nice flow of information. I feel like that's how I see it.